Welcome to the Cultivation Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Hamill, and today we are talking all about failures and how winning at them, succeeding at them, learning, growing from them is really the key to moving forward, and it all comes from having failures. So let's get into it. I know that many times when we fail, we really take on the identity of that failure, right? That we feel like we are a failure because we have failed, and it's just so not true, because the truth of the matter is every single one of us, the most successful person, the least successful person, the thing that we all have in common is that we have all failed in our life. We've all have a failure or have failures as a part of our story and who we are. And when we understand that failures is really our common ground, it should be disarming to us. It actually should be a relief to us, going, hey, failures, you've got them, I've got them, we've got them together. We all have them. The key is, how do you make failures work for you? How do you do that? And how do you make sure that you don't become so defeated that you don't take, as we talked about in the previous episode, that you stop taking risks because of failure or the fear of failure or the history of failure? And it's really important that we push through those. So I've got a couple of notes on failures, and I'm really passionate about this. I've got some tools that I'm building and some other resources that we're giving out and publishing and doing when it comes to failures, because I just feel like so many people aren't living the cultivated life because we talked about this in episode 1, season 2, the dirt that's packed around them that keeps them from breaking loose into that purpose and identity that they are, is the soil of failure. And the truth of the matter is, we don't have to be defined by our failures, but we could thrive because of our failures. And how do we do that? We got to grab a hold of the wins when we lose, right? And what are the wins when you lose? I know that sounds like a paradox or an oxymoron, right? That it's counterintuitive. Well, the wins are, what did you learn in the midst of that failure? What lesson could you bring out of that? What would you bring to the surface and do differently? Because now you're more educated, you're more experienced, you're more seasoned at life or at this adventure, this thing that you're trying. And because it was a failure, it wasn't an utter failure. It's only a complete failure when you fail to learn and grow, right? But when you can grab a hold of some of the wins, I wouldn't do that, but I would try it this way, And again, I know it's cliche now, and it's overused, but Thomas Edison didn't say, I failed at making a light bulb 10,000 times. I just discovered 10,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And I understand that's a kind of a famous saying, but the truth of the matter is, can you find the win in the lose, in the failure, in the defeat, or in the miss, right? Can you find the win? How did you grow? How are you more matured? How are you more seasoned? What is it that you can take away that is a lesson learned? It's so important that we understand that failure is a great teacher if we let it. We get stuck in our failures when we fail to learn the lesson, right? And that's so important that we understand that perspective, especially when you look at people who fail at the same things over and over again. And that's how they've defined insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And really, what does that mean? It means that you're stuck in your failures because you're not learning the lessons and then growing or changing your action by them so that you can become successful the next time around that you're taking that risk. And so in doing that, we have to redefine failure as instead of defeat, but as a teacher. And so Google has come up with a phrase that they like to use that's really incredible. I don't know if you've heard of them. There's a small little startup company. They're in California, Silicon Valley, but their goal is to fail fast. They want to say, how fast can we fail? How fast can we make this adventure fail? And so they try all different kinds of things. from Gmail to YouTube. I don't know if you know those are Google's things, Google Hangouts, all different kinds of things that they try all the time. And their goal is to try to get it to fail as fast as possible so that they could learn the lessons as quickly as possible of what works, what doesn't work, what resonates with people, what doesn't resonate with people. And so instead of looking at failure as a defeat, they're looking at failure as a teacher. And when we look at failure as a teacher, then our failure doesn't define us, but it propels us forward into that purpose, into that destiny. And so many of us, again, referring back to our previous episode, we don't take risks anymore. We cease to take risks because of that fear of failure, the paralyzing of failure. And again, I know I made reference to this once before, to this author, T.D. Jakes. He talks about what if the failures or the dirt that is crushing you isn't your grave? What if those failures aren't your grave, but it's your garden that's going to give birth to a whole new fruit, a whole new tree, a whole new growth in your life? What if we could view failures not as our grave that's killing us and destroying us, but if failures became our garden that we were buried in only so that we could come alive in a whole new form, a whole new fashion, a whole new purpose, a whole new destiny, a whole new awakening, and that our failures aren't meant to crush us and destroy us and demolish us, but rather to plant us into new soil so that we can learn and grow in a fresh way and become that person that we were always meant to be. Here's what I believe. I absolutely believe this. It's so important. It's so powerful. And I just want to speak this into you because we're trying to live the cultivated life, right? That we're trying to awaken the life, that person that we were always meant to be. And too many of us, we're imprisoned by our failures. We're imprisoned by our past, and it's not meant to be that way. And so what I've written down here in my notes is that failure is the birthplace of innovation and creation, or creativity. Failure is the birthplace of innovation or creation and creativity, right? That everything new that we have came as a result of something before it failing. Think about every piece of technology that we use. And the only reason it's advanced to this level is because someone was able to see the limitations of the previous version of that. I now have a set of Apple AirPod headphones, and to think when I was a young child, I remember riding my Huffy USA bicycle, down to Toys R Us, and I had gotten some money from chores and side jobs that I had done and house cleaning things, and I had gotten some money. And so I rode my Huffy bike down to Toys R Us, and I bought my very first cassette Walkman. Which, for those of you that don't know what that is or what that was, is what used to happen is instead of music being on our little skinny thin phones or iPods or whatever device is, music used to be recorded or put into a sound wave on a magnetic ribbon strip. I know this sounds really foreign, even trying to explain it. And you would put this into a little side-loading cassette player that would snap close, and then that ribbon would go across a series of magnets that would create some vibrations that would go up through a wire that then was tied to an aluminum strap that went over your head and put music on the outside of your ears. That was a Walkman. I know, sounds ridiculous. But when you say it that way, you're like, whoa. And before that, there was what we called an 8-track, which I'm not even old enough to even know what that was. We know what LPs are, or vinyls are, because they've come back now, but with even new technology. Here's the deal. I had that Walkman, and I loaded my mixtape into that Walkman, and I would ride my bike around and have to reload or repurchase batteries and listen to those cassette tapes, and they would wear out and start talking like this after a while, or I have to use a little pencil to wind up the ribbon back when it would come out of the cassette and do all those things. And somebody was like, there is a better way. And I'm so glad there's a better way, because I could only fit about maybe 6 or 8 or 10 songs on those cassettes. Maybe if you got the max one, you could get a little bit more. But now on my phone, I have thousands of songs and more that I can just stream that aren't even loaded onto my phone, but I can just stream them over the air wirelessly from outer space. I don't even know where they come from, but I can just tell Siri to play this song and it starts playing it into my wireless, no strings attached headphones that are inside my ears, right? And so I know this is a silly illustration, but here's the thing. That innovation came out of the failure or the lack of efficiency of what at the time I thought was really cool technology. If, in fact, I probably would have just been stuck in the tape cassette days if it hadn't been for somebody else discovering a failure in that and coming up with a better way. And so our failures really give birth to more innovation. The failure of the candle to provide enough light forced them to come up with the light bulb, right? And all of those kinds of, you can just keep saying it and seeing it over and over again. And so what innovative thing, what creative thing, what possible thing is laying dormant in you? It hasn't come to the surface yet. It hasn't been cultivated yet because you haven't learned from the failures. Rather, you've been defeated by them, imprisoned by them, held captive by them. But they're waiting to come to the surface because the goal is the cultivation podcast, at the cultivation life, is that failure is not our defeat, but it's our teacher. If we can learn from failures. And I just want to give you this quick assignment. Could you write down some lessons that you could learn from even simple failures? There's no failure too small or too big to learn from. So what failures could you learn lessons from that you go, hey, I'm going to do this differently now? Maybe it was a getting in shape plan. Maybe it was a New Year's resolution. Maybe it was a quit doing this and start doing that kind of a plan, and it failed. And so now you've given up on trying to achieve those goals. But what's the lesson in the failure that you can learn? Oh, I had the goal, but I didn't have a strategy to get that goal. Or, oh, I had the dream, but I didn't have the resources in place, right? What's the lesson that you can learn that you go, okay, now that I've learned that lesson, I'm going to do it differently, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to mature. And that is how we make failures our teacher. And that is how we win at failing. This is the Cultivation Podcast. Look, I failed to say that correctly. So glad that you listened today. Thanks for tuning in. Want to ask you, check us out on our website, ourcultivatedlives.com. Also, love to have you follow us on all of the social media feeds, platforms. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. At Tom Hamill is how you can find us there. Love to read your comments. Love to be inspired by your story. Hear what you're going through. Hear how you've conquered. Hear how you're living the cultivated life. And we would love to have you share the cultivated journey with your friends, family, your social media feeds. Hit us up on there. We totally appreciate it as we're trying to multiply our audience. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for journeying with us on the Cultivated Podcast. Thanks for checking us out today on the Cultivation Podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the incredible content that's coming your way. Also, in the comment thread below, be sure to put your comments, your feedback, your story. We want to hear that. We want to hear from you. We read those. We respond to those. We journey together in this cultivated life.